All right, thank you guys for coming for our exciting 5 BMWs to watch presentation here. This is a fantastic new facility. Is everybody having a good time checking this thing out today? Just heard the rain is going to completely miss us. Not a guarantee. We have a really fun group here today. I'm Brad Phillips. I'm with Hagerty. I'm just one of our goofy enthusiasts that love this sort of scene as much as you guys do. The deep knowledge on BMW history and excitement is right here in front of us. Dirk de Groen, raise your hand, please. There he is, right there in the first chair. Dirk studied automotive engineering in the Netherlands, and he worked at local BMW dealership and interned at BMW and Alpina. This is a 2002 nut job, would that be fairly safe to say, and has raced in tours and done exciting things all over the world. And I think this morning we were talking about you've done Paris to Peking, you've done the Mille Miglia, right? You've done some really major rallies around the world.
Yes.
So we're very excited to have you here with us.
We like to drive our cars, that's correct.
That is absolutely fantastic. Next door, straight out of Nashville, Tennessee, David Yando. Again, another lifelong BMW nut. David, I used to actually have an office right next door to David when I was trying to pull squatters' rights in the Lane Museum when I lived in Nashville a few years ago. And really great guy. You're going to have a lot of fun with this. And E30 M3 and 2002 owner. And again, loves to drive them. Next down, Eric Keller, not just running photography for us here today. Again, car enthusiast, addicted to BMWs, especially the M cars. And you have a business called the Enthusiast Auto Group from where you live in Cincinnati. You've been driving around a pretty neat BMW M1 for the past few days. So
it's awesome.
Yeah. Not sure how you couldn't describe an M1 as that, so that's great. And the guy who just decided to finally run up here and meet everybody needs no introduction to many of us here, but Eric Wensberg joined BMW of North America in 1985 and completely rebuilt their motorsports efforts, established BMW Skip Barber Advanced Driving School, and has basically done everything related to BMW enthusiasm and racing in his career here. So we're honored to have these 4 guys on the panel, and thank you all again for coming. We're going to, just to lay out, we're going to try and do about 30 minutes or so of slides. We're going to let these guys beat each other up freestyle on what they disagreed with along the way, of course, which is always a lot of fun. And we're going to get to some Q&A at the end. So as you're going along, please think of some good questions for these folks. And we're going to leave about 15 or so, or until they throw us out of here at the end. So it's going to be fun. And if this works, we've gone. All right. Naturally, to start off the contentious nature of this, we were going to do 5, and then we decided we had to do 6. So these are what we call attainable BMWs. And so they've had a little look at this. We're going to start off talking about 2002s, 320i's, E30s, which is a pretty broad class from what I've seen this week, E36 M3s, E34 M5s, E46 M3s. So we'll go through. I'll prompt you guys. I know you can't see the monitors and stuff, but those were the ones that we decided we were going to take a deep dive on. We're going to talk about some values on those cars a little bit, but mostly history, why they're fun, why we all want to be here talking about these. So off we go. BMW 2002, 68 to 76 is a lovely photo here. Dirk, would you like to kick us off on 2002s? There it is.
Well, I'm way too young to. I wasn't here in 1969, really. I mean, I was in the world, but not here in the car club. But that's really what the car club got. That's what it got started, and that's why all the old timers, became members at the time. And the 2002 is just such an icon, and that's why they used that name on the exhibition last year at the foundation. And I hope you all had a chance to see that exhibition, and if not, at least get the book from the foundation. It's just a wonderful car. And that's and I think from a driver's point of view, for me, that's what really got me started in the 70s. And I had a 1602, and then I went to a TII, a 2000 touring TII, and I still have those cars, not those particular ones, and I just get more of them. I just can't get enough of them in different bodies, different body styles, and the cabrio, the touring, the Targa, and it's wonderful driving cars, and I think they will always be with us, no matter what. They just don't go out of style, and there will always be people that are interested in those cars.
It was noticed this morning, I think, this was really the car that kind of kindled the enthusiast base for BMW, wasn't it? Eric, do you want to?
Very much so. I mean, this also brings up the North American discussion, which we can get into a little bit, but I think we should immediately acknowledge the long-suffering spouses in the room. One car becomes 10, becomes 12, becomes 20. Unfortunately, that's the way this passion runs, but there's no question that the 2002 kind of turned the page. Everyone was driving around the United States in these boxy little cars, flashing their lights at each other. I know a secret that you know something about. This car has some real spirit, some real balance, some real spunk, and it's not just about 0 to 60, it's about all of the measures of dynamic performance. It was a game changer in this country.
David, you're an enthusiast on these. You can kind of compare and contrast this car. What brought you to 2002s in the beginning?
I first saw 2002 when before I could drive. My parents had a Volvo 164E, which was the bad part. We lived in a small town in central Middle Tennessee. Nobody within 70 miles could work on it. So our Saturday mornings were spent either driving to Nashville to the dealer or Chattanooga to the dealer. Chattanooga dealer was across the street or next door, I can't remember, to the BMW dealer. And I just remember these little orange and green and red boxes sitting on the lot, and I loved the look of those cars. And I always wanted one. And when one became available, 97, I bought one. And that one's no longer with me, although I could still go and scrounge parts off of it. But yeah, the 2002 as a community, there's some websites, 2002 FAQ, which is a wonderful resource. There's no flame wars or anything. It's everybody helps. Just like here, if somebody had a problem, if you see a hood up, a 2002 owner will go over and say, do you need parts? Do you need tools? Do you need another hand? So it's a wonderful resources out there still. As long as parts supplies are still up, I think that, like Dirk said, the 2002 will be with us forever.
Well, and Dirk, you're planning, like you're a part of, 2002 specific tours and rallies and shows. It's a neat subset of the overall BMW enthusiast market that really is dedicated to these things, just very specifically.
That's correct. Yes, it's all over the country. I mean, there's all over the country. There's 2002 groups, and in the Northeast, there's the Northeast O-Tours or the O2 Northeasters. There's in Texas, there's a group in California, there's a group in North Carolina, there's a group. They're all over the place, and I think the passion becomes even more passionate. Like David said, if there's there's websites, there's parts, there's people around you. And and we like to keep them on the road, and we got to help each other. And not all the parts are available anymore, unfortunately. And so we rely a lot on used parts, on people that take cars apart, and it's important that community stays alive.
Hello? There's even people who are re-engineering things, door hinges. The original door hinges don't really last all that long. So there's a gentleman who takes Mercedes door hinges, cuts them, re-welds them, and bolt them in, and they're going to last forever. People are re-engineering the light clusters for roundies because they were pretty dim even in perfect condition. So putting in LED retrofits so people don't get rear-ended when they're out driving their cars, because we like to drive the cars.
Well, let's go to the tail of the tape here on 2002 values right now. So the Hagerty price guide, we call a number 3 car is a good car. You go to a car show, you see a very presentable example of something. Maybe it's not a trailer cream, but it's a really, really nice car. That's what we consider a number 3. So if you look at, we're up 28% in these since 2016. So by most measures, I would say these have been a good investment. Keller, you're pretty close to the buying and selling of these things. Does this mirror what you've seen in the marketplace?
Yeah. We don't do a lot of 2002s. Our mainstay starts with the first, pure M cars in the early 80s, like the M1 that we're driving to current. But watching the market as a whole is something we have studied since day one. And the 2002s absolutely have done every bit of that and more, and we've definitely seen a lot of really high watermarks in the last 12 to 24 months. But it's been the original Survivor and/or the really well done nut and bolt restoration by a name brand shop that everybody knows and has verified and validated. The tuner community, of course, is live and well, and started with the 2002s to a degree within the BMWs mainstream wise. And even some of those have brought some significant money. One specifically, club member owned, Mario Langston did with an S14, did $70-some thousand, 2 years ago even. And so quality, the top, the number twos, the number one cars are going to be, pushing six figures even in a non-turbo. The turbos will be six figures for all the good ones. But definitely a great market. Exciting, hard to find the really pure, pristine, especially the Survivor original ones. But when you do, there's a really strong demand for the top stuff.
Well, I think it's worth touching on the restoration of these cars as well, because we had a discussion this morning at breakfast about Bobby Rahal. Went to Denison University. He's an up-and-coming driver. He's an engineering student. He met his future wife in an Inca Orange 2002 while he was in college. That car went the way of all things. Sadly, in the end, his marriage went the way of all things. But having said that, 10 years ago, he came back to a big restoration shop in Chicago, the workshop that we all know, and he spent $150,000 recreating that car. Now, it's the orange car that you've seen in some BMW commercials. It's a beautiful piece. But he spent well beyond what the car would be considered worth in the marketplace because it meant so much to him in his memories of his youth. And I think that's what builds the passion. That's what really builds the intrinsic value and the enthusiasm over these cars.
I absolutely agree with you. And I don't think that you ought to buy a 2002 as an investment. It's not an investment object. And you just mentioned the number of 28% there over 3 years. That's a lousy investment compared to, if you look at other things that you could have made much more money in it. Now, let's just take an amount of $10,000. 28% of $10,000 is $2,800. Divided by 3, that's $900 a year. That's not an investment.
It costs more than that to run the car.
It costs more than run it. Exactly. You got one reparation bill, and it's more than that, one repair bill.
But at the end of the day, it's an entertainment. It's fun, and there's a reason when you go to a movie, it costs $10 to watch the movie. It's you pay for entertainment, and that's the cost of having that fun. And if it keeps up with appreciation, great. But buy what you love, enjoy it, drive it, share it with others, and if it holds its value along the way, that's a win.
I think that's the real point, is buy it if you're passionate about it and enjoy driving it. That's the reason to have them.
Well, and look at this too. We're talking right here at a major event. We're talking about cars that are $14,000, $15,000 that are really fun to drive, really exciting, that can be a wonderful entry point for anyone that wants to get into the collector car hobby and find something fun to drive and become part of an incredible community. I think that number is better than the 28%.
Well,
it's still an attainable number for people.
You get thumbs up everywhere you go.
Yeah.
Anytime you're driving a 2002, you get less thumbs up in a Ferrari. But anybody sees a 2002,
you get one finger up.
Well, it's the one finger salute. Yeah, absolutely. And driving that car, it doesn't. Young, old, anybody that sees it. We've got a '73 Tii that we bought from the original owner, thinking we were going to resell it 7-8 years ago, and it was just so cool and so fun. We decided to keep it, and that car honestly turns just as many heads as anything that we will pull out of the collection to play around with.
A couple of days before leaving for O-Fest, I had a Panamera driver lose his mind on the interstate, taking pictures out of his sunroof. He was in front of me, next to me, around me, and I ran into him. He's a salesperson at the BMW dealer. And I pulled up to get some parts for my M3, and he was just like, "That's your car? Do you want to sell it?" He had one when he was in college and wanted another, and he just loved it. So. And
that's going to be a recurring theme, I think, with a lot of these cars. Is a lot of people, especially from my perspective, they're buying cars that they had at some point, the memories that they had in those cars, the life experiences that they had. They're buying that good time memory machine back. And they're educated owners because they've already owned one of these or two of these or five of these before, and so they know what the pitfalls are. And so those are the guys that are really buying the top quality stuff because they're educated buyers going in and they're doing the research. And those are the guys that are pushing the market, spending $40, $50, $60, $100,000 for the top stuff because they want to have the best and not have the headache of having to go through what they did a long time ago when they went on the less expensive side.
Right. And now that's a great segue. So this is what I knew was going to happen. We're going to spend the first 20 minutes on the first car, and then we're going to have to rush around a little bit. So anyway,
go ahead.
we're moving to the 320.
Before you move on, quick call about the 2002. Who in the group does not own a 2002?
These are my peeps. These are my peeps right here.
Those are
Good.
the peeps.
We got some to come for you too.
That's right. No, and all the people that just rose your finger, that's going to be your next car. It really ought to be your next car, really.
We're handing them out behind the tent for anyone who wants one.
And then I can
Dirk has
guarantee you,
plenty to go around.
From there, it's only downhill.
How many do you own, Dirk?
Why do you ask? I own one of each body iteration. In other words, the regular one, the TI, the TII, the Targa, the convertible, and I stop where the square taillight starts.
And then there are the parts cars, and then there are the engines and the other things. So I'm going to count it as a dozen.
It's a fair number. All right. BMW again, 320i. I seem to remember everyone agreed with this and thought it was a 100% win on the thing. 77 to 83, 320i. Go.
The one that no one really cared about. It's from the 2002, the interest sort of stopped, and then it came back with the E30. And it's unfortunate. I don't think it was really a great car. When I was young and when I was driving my 2002 and I was seeing on the Autobahn the 323i's going past, flying past, I mean, that was for me the car to have. But in hindsight, I mean, it's just not the same thing for me.
We had two of them. My wife and I had two of them back in the day, and I did the family a favor by putting one into a telephone pole in a snowstorm in Westchester. But at the end of the day, when you look at that car, a step up from the 2002, a little more sophisticated, a little more creature comforts. Unfortunately, the handling and the spirit of the car kind of got lost in the translation. In the overall scheme of things, perfectly fine car, fun to get in and drive, but probably does not represent an awesome investment opportunity for us going forward.
I remember this well because I actually had a roommate in college that had a 320. And at the time, this was the late 80s, I had an Integra 1.8 liter Acura. And he had his 320. And we would race him all the time. And I'd chirp the front tires, he'd chirp the back tires going into second. And that was about all either one of those cars would do. But it was really fun to do that over and over and over again. Little windy sunroof. I mean, it had some redeeming qualities, but you're right. The E30 that came after was just so different.
Well, we used to have a joke, which I will now tell you because they can't fire me. I've been out of BMW for 20 years. We used to have a joke that we were hell-bent on putting traction control, modern traction control, on all of the M-Series cars, but then the entire product line, because of the reputation in poor weather and snow that the 320i gave the brand. And that was no joke. I mean, it took us quite a while to get that done. It added some cost. It added some complexity. But once we achieved that, this is late 80s, early 90s, it really did change the public perception of the company. So when you talk about collector cars, you have to talk about the values of the brand, the performance capabilities, the styling. There are a lot of factors here. There's not just one. Sometimes it's an interesting combination of factors. But the thing that we were talking about this morning that is absolutely true and very true in BMW's case is that many of the most collectible cars today in BMW's history were not commercial successes when they were announced for one reason or another. And we will talk about that more specifically as we go.
All right, let's go quickly. We'll go to values on these. 19% up, but look at the number. A number 3 car is still under $7,000. So again, something someone can use to get a leg into the hobby. I have to say, I like these things. I thought they were pretty neat. Now, can you speak a little bit like the European version of this, was it a little hotter? Was it a little more interesting than the one that we got here in America? Was that did it add to the lure of it?
Go ahead. But they had a larger engine. They had a more advanced suspension. David Hobbs tells some very funny stories about driving the 320 turbo, and he drove around half a dozen tracks saying, the really thing needs a sway bar in the rear. And the Germans all said, well, no, they don't have a sway bar in the rear. That's why it feels like you need one. And he forced them to put one on and picked up about 4 seconds a lap. And then they thought, oh, sway bar in the rear, good idea. But the 323, I think it was, and I think there was another one. But they did have some hotter variations in Europe than we took. I think the judgment in America was, frankly, just to move on.
That seems to be a theme, too, with a lot of BMW.
Very much so.
The version we get here isn't always what you get over there.
Well, and remember, I had a conversation with someone here this morning in the 73, 74, 75. The company was very small. They had just taken over from the private importer, Max Hoffman, and the infrastructure was really pretty meager compared to what you see today. So they had a lot of things going on in Europe, a full head of steam. We were just getting started in America. So you have to keep that in mind. That gave rise to the gray market and some of these other.
And the one talking about investments and cars that from that E21 series that are worth looking at it are, of course, the Alpina version, which is the B6 2.8, which is, they made a lovely car out of that.
And almost anything that can be done to a 2002 can be done to a 320. So like Eric said, the perception of the car wasn't great, but it can be made great now. And it does have a little bit better rust protection, a little bit more in the way of creature comforts. And I think you're going to see those continue to rise. We've got an employee at the museum who keeps his eye on those, although he just bought a DeLorean, so his bucket list car is kind of shut off now.
You guys cultivate a bizarre sensibility at the museum, don't you?
Yeah, well, we like weird. And but anyway, he's been watching 320s for the last year or two, and good ones are getting up there. They're getting close to 10, and but there's very few left that are worth having.
Well, maybe this is the poster child for time heals all wounds. Then perhaps as we move forward. All right, we're going to go on to crowd favorite. Pretty much everywhere you go, you could probably do the same game where who's got an E30 in the crowd or who's been around a lot of them, right? I mean, lots of hands there too, but not as many as I thought we'd get. Really? So 83 to 91, and we're talking 318i's, 318IS's, the E's and the 325s and the 325i's. I've been running around all week in an E30 318IS. Our friend Tim at Grassroots, his project car, we're on the track in it yesterday, and it's an absolute hoot. We had a great time. And a lot of time in 325IS's in the past. I mean, I don't know what you could say that would be wrong with these cars. I mean, they're so balanced, so incredible.
I'll tell you a quick story. I think my mic is dying. I'll tell you a quick story about being with Ray Corman in the mid-'80s at Watkins Glen at a 325E with the ETA engine, red line at 4,900 RPM. We thought this is just hopeless. And they had a Firehawk race with a field of 105 cars. And we are racing in the middle class. There's a pea shooter class, and there's the middle class, and then the Grand Sport class was the Firebirds and Camaros. They ran this thing, did lap after lap after lap, stayed out of the pits, just filled it with gas. He had a unique way to cheat with the front brake rotor so he could change his pads very quickly. We kept the thing out of the pits. We ended up winning the race outright, not just our class. We won the race outright. It had never happened in IMSA history. And typical of Ray Corman, the guys who know him, he had a crew of 3. And I said, Ray, come on. We're going to have a team dinner, a victory dinner tonight on me. We're super excited. We'll do a poster. Sure enough, Ray shows up with 21 guys. But there is a poster in the Passion exhibit right now that shows that car in front of a horde of other Detroit Iron, and it was an astounding victory by a very reliable, well-driven, to be sure, but well-balanced chassis. It was really fun.
Was there much of a difference in these from your perspective, 2-door versus 4-door on the handling and the excitement level?
Typically, the four-door would have a slightly longer wheelbase. We addressed that with the M3 in a different way with the E36, but the answer is no. And one of the reasons that we strived very, very carefully on the engineering side is to really make the car well-balanced no matter what. If it's a longer wheelbase or a shorter wheelbase, 50-50 weight distribution was always the goal. We didn't always hit it spot on, but as we did it more, we got better and better. So by the time you got to the modern era, let's say E30 M3, perfect example, was designed as a race car. And we made compromises to bring it out as a road car, but the reality was it was the most successful touring car around the world in history, winning something like 1,300 races.
To this day, it's still the record holder. The E30, I think, is, at least for my generation, the modern 2002. I mean, that's really where we cut our teeth and have spent most of our time. And frankly, my brother and I, Evan, we had a 325 IS. We were both in our teens. And the road trips and all the memories that we created with that car were definitely one of the catalysts that helped push us to gravitate to us towards the the thing we now call it a severe addiction to these cars. I think the E30 chassis is the only one that we have multiples of in our collection, and I think we've got 5 of them. Relative to one of the rest of the stuff that we play with, and just the whole driving dynamics of any E30 doesn't matter if it's a 318 IS. That's just an absolute blast of a car to drive. It's so lightweight and it's a momentum car, and if you get it right, it's just a very rewarding car because it's very, very telepathic in its communication to the driver, and it's a very engaging exercise. Of course, the M3 is the ultimate variant of that, and for those that have piloted an E30 M3, I mean, you remember that. And today, with the valuations as they've gone over the last decade, basically, they've gotten unobtainable for a lot of people. You can still get a project car for 20, 30, 40 grand and go at it. But the rate of attrition has been so high on all of the E30s. Doesn't matter if it's an M3 or not. Is they're rust prone, and finding a really good, clean example, especially an unmolested one, an original one that's not had a rough life, is the minority now. And they again can sell for a lot of money. We see a lot of 6-figure E30 M3s, quarterly, almost monthly, it's just a marvelous car to drive and enjoy. I think pretty much everybody in this room, for the most part, has had a good memory, good experience in an E30 at some point, and they remember that, and that's why a lot of people are coming back to them again today.
I think it's neat that we talk about these as a performance car and an enthusiast car more than anything, but there was a time these were the poster car for die yuppie scum, right? I mean, these were expensive in their day, and there was you had your red Varnays on and you're heading off to the country club. That's not really how people think about them now, I don't think.
Right. Break my window and steal my radio. I mean, we lived through all of that.
Now, Eric, at the levels where they are now, at the price levels, would you still consider it to be a good investment?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's old school enough and analog enough that it's still engaging to the younger segments of the market, and a lot of the 20s and 30s demographics want and have these cars, and they're they're cutting their teeth on them. It's easy to work on. A lot of father-son projects, actually a ton of father-son projects. We get that call monthly. We want to do something. I don't want a perfect car. I don't want it totally done, and I want to be able to do this as a bonding exercise, which a lot of people, myself included, had coming up. And I think that that's a great way to get the younger guys in the hobby because you can do it still relatively inexpensively. You can get a car for $4 or $5 grand and start there. And
Simple enough to work on.
Yeah, it's easy. Then how many do they make? I mean, over 1 million. So there's still a good amount of cars out there that are candidates to get into the hobby and bring up to your own standard. And I think that the E30 is here to stay. Just as strong as the 2002 will, just for a 10 to 20-year-old younger demographic.
And another thing about the E30 is it's swappable. You can put in almost anything. I've seen nice V8 jobs, S50s, S54s, 5-bolt lug conversions so you can get the good brakes and suspension.
There's guys doing electric conversions, a lot of them too.
Yeah. Yep. So, the E30, because there were so many built, you don't feel like you're chopping up a piece of history to make it into what you want, and it's easy enough to do that.
I love the personalization of so many of the cars that I've seen here this week. Bigger engines, 5-speed transmission conversions, but they all can still do that and look really stealthy and original on the outside. I love that that thing. That's great.
And I think that's a lovely segue to the point I was going to make. I think you can say the E30, capped by the E30 M3, really set the stage for BMW in the modern era, talking about the design philosophy. We used to talk about ergonomics a lot. We used to talk about the balance of the car, the real performance envelope. And it's not just about kind of the Mopar guy on the insurance commercial with, you want to go 0 to 60. It was really about 60 to 0. It was really about G-forces. It was about cornering radiuses. It's about every measurable aspect of what a car can do. That is what BMW really cut its teeth on with the cars that came later.
Well, and our numbers on this, between $10,000 and $11,000 is still a good number 3 E30, excluding M3. That's a different deal, and we will do a little bit deeper dive on that, but still pretty good.
And they used to be $500 cars. I mean, 10 years ago, every mechanic was driving a $500 325.
I bought a 1984 318i in 2003 for $800. Painted it in my dad's wash bay. We painted it Ford Thunderbird white because, well, we grew up in the country and it was cheap paint. And that was our college beater car for 2 years or so until we had a pretty bad. It was a blast. And that's when we learned that tires are important. That's a different story.
Today, that's a coffee table in his shop. You should see it.
It's wadded up.
All right, we're going to work our way down. We're going to start getting into some of the bigger cars. Now, we're talking about the BMW E34 M5. They built between 88 and 95. Yes, for you eagle eyes in the audience, I realize that's an E39 next to it.
That's my fault.
Yeah. I don't,
The E39 just as well should be on the list because, frankly, that car is just on fire, mega on fire. We're selling more of those than ever. We have less of them than ever. If we had 10 E34s, they'd be gone in a week. The E39s are not really much different. Same story. I had one. I sold it. I loved it. E34 and E39, there's totally a congruent overlap. That car left a massive impression on those people, and it just did everything so very well. And it can do the track. It can do the street. It can pick up the kids, drop them off at school. And it's reliable. It makes great noises. It's mega interactive with the driver. And they're not super hateful to work on if you buy the right one that's been owned by somebody probably in this room that's really cared and had the financial fortitude to keep it up to a high degree always in its life as opposed to buying one down low and trying to bring it back up. That's a whole different exercise, and that's what service shops like myself, that's our gravy. Those are probably not the cars that you're going to want to have. You won't do that twice. Let's just say that.
If you look at the E34 M5, Eric has a beautiful M1 that we came down in this morning. Fantastic car, really fun. Everybody gets out of your way. It's really super. Get good parking spots. But if you look at the components of that car, Paul Rocha really had a real vision of what could make a good sports car, starting with balance, starting with power. M1's routinely called one of the greatest sounding sports cars ever made. You take those elements and you put them in a 4-door chassis where people can really drive this car every day. That became kind of the modern philosophy of what M engineering was about. We don't want to stand out with raised white letter tires and a lot of stripes and crap on the car. We want to build a relative sleeper that would outperform your neighbor's Ferrari. And that really is where it came from.
The original wolf in sheep's clothing.
And there's no doubt about it. You can talk about the E28. Everybody loved that. We used to call it the flying brick, but a fantastic car. We thought, hey, great idea. We'll bring in 400 of them, one for each dealer. And then Munich, well, it became a lot more than that. Pirelli did a great ad saying, be one of the 400 fastest families in America, and here it is flying over a hill. We thought, this is great. And then Munich said, hey, the car is slow in Europe and Japan. Can you take a few more? So they come back, and 400 became 800, and then 400 became almost 1,200, and then all the original owners sued us for ruining their investment.
And to clarify, because there's
times.
guys out there that are all about the numbers, it was 1,340 for North America. It was 99 for Canada. And it was the fastest 500 families in America, and that's when the lawsuit came about. But that car is what started our passion really for the M brand and why we focused on M back in the day. And the E28 M5 with that engine, like the M88 and the S38 that's in the M1, that engine just is absolutely a masterpiece that really laid the base work for all of the M engines to come. I mean, the McLaren F1 engine is basically the ultimate derivative of the M88 with individual throttle bodies. Just add a really trick head setup to it. And the S14 cut the back two cylinders off. Everything's the same. The valve shims, the whole timing set, all those are the same part numbers with the S14, the S38. The M88's got a couple different valve shims and things, but that engine, that basically the E34 M5 had the ultimate big dog version of that in the 3.8 liter in Europe. That was the largest displacement six-cylinder BMW M has ever built, 340 horsepower, 6-speed on the 94s and 95s, and a lot of people just absolutely fell in love with that car, and today values have been much, much, much stronger, and I see that continuing for the next foreseeable future.
And you look at the aerodynamic improvements on that car, the E34, and then the E39 to come. The E34 itself was 300% stiffer as a chassis. Not only much better aerodynamically. We raced it with David Donahue in the Supercar Series. We were beating a lot of cars that we had no business beating. The whole challenge was to keep the tires. We had a spec tire from BF Goodrich. Keep the tires underneath the car, run it around for 35 minutes, and then blast off in the last 10 minutes and pass everybody, which is exactly how we won the championship in 93, I think, 94. But the reality of it was a much more sophisticated car all the way around than the E28 was, as popular as that car has become.
Yeah. Can't say much better now.
Well, when you think of these two, in this era, there still really weren't that many four-door semi-supercars. This was still an anomaly, right? Even though it was a sleeper.
Very unusual idea.
And they made BMW for North America brought less of the E34s in than the E28s by just a couple. And so finding them, 91, 92, 93, I think there were like 91 or 2 92s built and 270 some 93s built. It's a really small pool to pull from. And the thing that we didn't touch upon, E30, all the first gen M5s, they're such great driving cars that the rate of attrition is just crazy, because that's the car that you park closest to the door in the house in the garage, and that's the car you grab the keys to more times than not. And so that car has 150,000 miles in the first 5 years, and then that's the car that gets parked outside when the E39 or whatever comes out. And so finding those in really, really good shape is amazingly difficult. And 50,000 miles on an E34 or an E28, that's no different than a 5,000 mile, Porsche of the same era. Those cars are comparables because it was just not revered as a timepiece or capsule like the M6s were, which typically have a lot lower average mileage. And so the survivorship of the M5 is much less, and the uptick of the values has been astronomical, especially with the E28s.
Well, and they're up 48% on our measures here since 2016. But we're still talking about a $28,000 car.
And apropos of this, the type of buyer, subtle, sophisticated, wanted a high-performance car without necessarily showing your neighbor what you bought. My job, my wife was very keen on this, was during that period, everyone who wanted to buy an E34 M5 and all of the 850 CSIs, we only did a couple of hundred of them, my job was to take them to Munich and take them to 3 days of European M driving school to really teach them how to drive. And we had a ball doing it. But we would not put traditional sales incentives on these cars. We took them to Europe and taught them how to drive it.
That's great. All right, we're going to keep ripping right through here. We are going to the E36 M3, 94 to 99. Awesome, awesome, awesome. And again, you could get this in a 2-door or a 4-door. We're obviously, our picture here is of the 2-door version of it, and I think I've seen that exact car here.
And a
Somebody
convertible.
owns it. And convertible.
And a wagon in Europe.
There you go. So very versatile.
This was my car. It was the one that I kind of debuted as the first BMW's first M brand manager. I joke they didn't really know what to do with me, so they handed me M at a very low level. And if I had drilled it right through the floor, no one would have noticed, because we were only selling a couple of hundred cars a year. But the idea here was to really make a much more sophisticated platform and really take the European engine was fairly sophisticated, individual throttle bodies and manually adjusted valves, high test fuel only. It It had the top insurance values of any car registered in Germany, and it would have been $55,000 in America. And we sat down and did a lovely study. Everything was really cool. We would sell exactly 500 of them. And so we took that to Munich and said, look, we've done this before. This doesn't really work for us. We're selling 15 million cars and trucks in the US a year. 50 or 60 cars or 100 cars is a blip on the radar screen. We need to get down to about 35,000. And they said, well, it's not possible. We ended up getting into a really detailed discussion about a more conventional head that was on the shelf in the parts bin already. We took that car, put it together, tried it, and the difference in 0 to 60 times was 0.2 of a second. And I went to our people, I said, what are we talking about here? This is silly. We're saving 20 grand. So they built a US version of the E36 M3, and we set the world on fire. Not only did we get Car of the Year for Automobile Magazine, we'd never won it before. We took it over to Europe. We had all these suspension settings. We took all the magazines to the Nürburgring, and we handed them a dozen cars, and we said, each one of these has a different suspension setting. You drive them, and we've got all of the M cars we've ever made over here. You can drive those too. And we absolutely had a gas for 3 days in the rain at the Nürburgring. And Vic Doolin crashed on lap 2. So he went back to the hotel, and we had a great day. But we really wanted to bring the American market into this discussion, and we broke all volume records that we had ever seen. We outsold Porsche in America for the first time, and that led to the discussion about the four-door, the convertible, and some of these others. And the four-door was a huge fight. They did not want to do it. They said it'll cost $300 million to retool for a four-door, and we have not had that great a sales rate. So we said, we disagree. We went back and forth. In the end, we got it. They were selling in Europe, and Canada was perhaps the best example. They took the European car. They did not take our car. They sold exactly 50 a year in all of Canada. We took the four-door. We started marketing it not as kind of, sort of like the coupe. Every single setting was exactly the same. Same wheelbase, same everything. So if you're a realtor and you have to bring your family around, you have to use the car every day, you could have the capability of a four-door. And Munich said, we sold 400 of these last year in Germany, and we were selling 400 a month. And they didn't know how we did it. And we said, look, we just come right back to fundamentals. We had a lot of fun doing this, and this is when Germany and America had a real back and forth debate on what is right for this market.
In 97, 98, 9,000 M3 sedans were built. They offered the automatic as well. I think 4,815 had a manual transmission. A lot of people I know in this room have had the sedans, and that's a fantastic car to get into the hobby with too, because still really relatively affordable to get in one today. You can start in at 7, 8, 10, 12 grand to get into something. You can spend 2, 3, 4 times that too if you wanted to buy the top. But I think that car is again here to stay. It's a really driver-friendly car that's great to teach the younger drivers on car control with traction control became a standardized item on the 96 models and later, the first gen of the automatic stability control. That car and that chassis on track and on the street, still a safe car too. Relatively speaking, in 98 standardized the side airbags for the front passengers. And I definitely think that car's here to stay, but again, same thing, broken record that the rate of attrition, because it's such a great driving car, most of them have buku miles and have rusted to back into the earth, and definitely an enthusiast car through and through, though.
Well, and you look at BMW's lineup today, and there's a butt for every seat, right? From 1s through 8s and a million varieties of each one. To me, this is kind of where that started, because you could have the E46 that you could get in all these different models, different transmissions, all this stuff, so you could really start to feel like you could customize one of these things for almost any buyer.
And world-class performance that you could drive every day. That was our motto. You know, we didn't have automatics back then. We didn't have an automatic that would take the torque of the M engines. And we really challenged our transmission partners to come up with a 5-speed close ratio automatic that you... My father had an 80s M6, one of the last ones we sold. And he had Ferraris, he had many cars. But most of our volume came from New York, Miami, Chicago, Dallas, you know, where you have real commuting. And let's face it, a manual transmission in an M car from that period, your foot went numb pretty quickly if you were in traffic. So we began to really think about how do we expand the envelope without ruining the performance driving experience.
And a lot of the guys these days now, they're coming back to them, actually want the automatic because, you know, they're not exactly, super great in the leg anymore. And so the automatics actually have started to kind of tick back up because for the longest time, you could buy, basically twice the automatic for the same price of the manual. But that gap's definitely started to close from my perspective.
Well, and we're Hagerty is all about trying to get young people to learn how to drive stick shift cars. So I don't mind us talking a little bit about automatics, but let's still teach people how to use the other ones.
Save the manuals.
Save the manuals, absolutely. Well, and so we've come up, again, we were about $17,000 to get an E36 M3, which anything with an M badge on it, that sounds like it ought to be 3 times that, even for a number 3 car.
Well, speaking of which, I want to do a little postscript on the M3 Lightweight. That was another one of my brilliant ideas that I thought was so simple. Porsche does it all the time. And the idea was, look at the 911 RS, what a cool car. It was the baby car to the RSR, which was a full-blown race model. You delete a few things, you take out some sound deadening, no radio, presto changeo, you have a Firehawk car people can really buy and be competitive with. We went to Munich with that idea in 95, and they said, sure, oh yes, we can do this, no problem. And I said, great, we'd like to do low volume, but we've got a number of teams that would like to race them. We don't have a lot of things to offer them in the showroom stock kind of variety. And we talked about 100 cars, give or take. And one thing led to another, and they began to school me on what it's about to take the car off the production line and actually either take things off or not put things on. And I said, how hard can it be? You just keep it off. No insulation, no radio, no this, no that, no air conditioning. We're saving money here. And they said, oh, no, Mr. Wensberg. This all costs more. And that was the beginning of the downhill slide that became the M3 Lightweight. It ended up with them calling me in the spring and saying, well, we have a small issue. It's not a big problem. We have a small issue. We've taken care of it for you. We're not going to produce the cars in February like we were talking about. We're going to produce them in October.
Of 95, of the model year.
So the model year is over. The racing season is completely over. And we're bringing 125 cars into the United States with no radio and no air conditioning and no sound deadening. Our sales manager said, oh, Eric, this is a flipping disaster. These cars are sale-proof. So in addition to a wing and an oil pan and some other things that we had to put in the trunk that were blatantly illegal, we couldn't put them on the car because the DOT would arrest us. We put them in the trunk so you could put them on the car and race it. And now today, like we said, very unsuccessful. It took us almost a year to get rid of them. Many of the dealers just took them and squirreled them away. But now they are setting the standard and put this guy's kids through college, I'll say. He's probably sold most of them 2 and 3 times, but it almost cost me my job, that car.
And the lightweight, I think, is a cool design, high point for BMW, for the brand to actually say, yes, we're going to build a spec race car. We're going to do something that's that far out of the box. That's a really special thing for the brand to do. And it is to me a historic car for the market. The whole CSL moniker on the owner's manual. A lot of guys say it's not an M3 CSL. Well, it was 200 pounds less than the standard car, and it had some pretty great racing history. Did it not?
It did. I had to beg Munich to build us 10 pre-production cars to put with a few race cars, and the next phone call I get is John Paul Jr. calling me from Sears Point telling me he had just made a coffee table with the first one. So we did our best to run them, and they actually did have some success on the racetrack. A number of teams did well with them, and it was mildly successful as a Firehawk race car. But I took it as a learning experience about how dealing with a international manufacturing company is not exactly as easy as you think it might be.
And the market on that has definitely been, for the collectors for the last decade or so, and as a lot of people have seen on different, media sites here just in the past 3 weeks or so, Paul Walker had a collection of he had 7 at one point. We sold several of them to him back in the day, and he saw that as a budding collectible when they were still, I think the first one we sold him was about $40,000, which the market had started to go up at that point. We sold him another one that was in a track, shunted off a bit, and that was a $35,000 car in 2011 or so. And he had a collection of stuff that he just absolutely loved, and so now 5 of those cars are coming to auction at Barrett-Jackson in January as a group, all selling no reserve. They're going to individually sell. So it should be pretty exciting to watch in the marketplace to see what both the lightweight itself does for what the lightweight is, if there's any star power to that car as well. But great cars all the same, and if you've not driven one, there's a noticeable difference between that and a standard car. It's a very, very capable track car right out of the box. It is super fun, super engaging. Everything that's E30 is, just more of it and with more confidence.
Well, and we move on to the next generation, right? The E46 M3, 2000 through 2006. We have seen a lot of these running around O-Fest this week. But we still view this as an attainable collector car. This just does everything more, better, faster, greater than everything else put before it.
The important thing about the E46 was, once again, here is BMW M really pushing the boundaries. We had a rash of bearing failures in the early cars, and one of the reasons that became an issue, I had a long talk with Steve Dinan, who is a dear friend, and I said, what do you really think is at the bottom of this? And he said, well, they have now measured the piston speed on this engine rivals a Formula One car in a production car. I mean, they were taking the 6-cylinder engine to the very outside boundaries of development. They had to go back and redesign the bearings, which they did. It was a recall. It was not a big deal. But the reality of it is, this is a car that is a real hoot to drive. And it was also, Wolfgang Reitzler was our chief product guy, and very Germanic. He looked like Errol Flynn, very handsome guy. And this was the last car he had his hands on. And when you look at how tidy those lines are, how really well put together and proportioned that car is. He left the company shortly thereafter because they would not make him president. But I always thought this was one of his finest pieces of work.
I think that market is definitely one that should be watched. We've sold a little over 1,000 of them in our time so far, and the 6-speed variants are going to sell for the most amount of money. The SMGs, though, are also holding relatively strong, and that engine did 8,200 RPMs. It won basically every engine accolade a manufacturer could win in period. It still is a very, very analog driving experience. It's very engaging to the driver. Still not a ton of money. The values on those have, for the top stuff, doubled in the last 3 to 4 years from our perspective.
Or 37%.
Well, they go back 4 or 5 years, but sure. Right. And the competition models, they made 2,410 of those between both transmissions, is going to be the top of the food chain. But I think you'll see those cars continue to hold and continue to go up in value over the next 5 years. Consistently, again, the top level cars are going to do the strongest. But and the convertible's a great car with 4 seats. There's not a lot of 4-seat convertibles that you can use to do the ice cream runs in the summer. That's a really good buy right now. You can buy a lot of M3 convertible for 20, 25, 30 grand and have a lot of fun with that car.
And expect to get your money out of it, too.
Yeah, you can drive that car for little to nothing. Just buy the right one, get the baseline reset when you get it. For every year a car is old that we buy for bringing to market, that's $500 to $1,000 we'll put into that car to put our brand on it and make sure this turnkey for the next guy. And it costs more up front. You're going to spend it no matter what. It's just you spend it up front or spend it in the rear. But getting that car at top peak operation, that's it's a really enjoyable car to drive.
And it was a real return to M-ness for BMW. You open the hood on an E36, and it looks like a regular BMW six-cylinder, but you open the E46, and you're back to the individual throttle bodies. Made the great exhaust sound. Some people thought it was a little raspy. Returned to some really wonderful, bright colors that we didn't see before that sort of evoked the 2002 era, getting back to the Incas and that sort of thing. So a lot of people look at it as the last great M car because of the inline, the naturally aspirated M car anyway, the hand-built M engine and the individual throttle bodies, and it's a great car.
It was the last six-cylinder with this weird thing called a dipstick.
Dirk, would you agree this could be potentially the most direct and last link to the early cars, to 2002 specifically?
Maybe it's. I got to be quite frank. This is all young stuff for me. I have to admit I've never even driven one, so I'm not. I'm very happy we have some other experts with us here.
Well, and if I can, I'm not sure how much time we have, but if we digress,
Oh, we're already over, but I don't think anybody cares. It's pouring down rain.
if we digress just for a minute, you talk about the modern era, and people ask me all the time, what should I think about in terms of this car and that car, and should I be paying this kind of money? The reality of the car business today is that it is very, very competitive. Environmental concerns are at the forefront of everything they do. The mileage, there are a lot of fuel mileage concerns, California getting sued, and on and on and on. It just is not a fun environment right now. But what does that mean to the M company? I used to describe M as a skunk works of about 500 people in a worldwide corporation of 125,000 people. So you see, it really was BMW's hot rod shop that went all the way from modifying a CSL with aluminum panels. They put it in the wind tunnel. It did better backwards than it did forwards when they started. So, I mean, this was a very sincere effort to really get to the bottom of what excellent engineering in a performance context, engineering the car around the driver. Today, what you're finding is the accountants have caught up to us. They are not allowing dedicated M engines to be developed anymore. It's more parts bin engineering. What do we have that we can put a turbocharger on? What do we have? Bill talked about the new turbo technology, which is actually quite impressive. But it's all dealing with stuff from other models. And the reality of it is the world is not the same as it was in the 80s or 90s. And it's hard to really stand out in a performance context in today's market, let alone make any money. I was really good at selling a lot of cars where we didn't make a lot of money. We did some other things that we are all excited about and had some fun with, took them on the racetrack, beat Porsche at Daytona with a 4-door car. We put it into the winner's circle and put a taxi sign on the roof, and Porsche wouldn't speak to us for a season and a half. But the reality of it was really fun, and we thought we were a competitive company that really had our brand on our sleeve, and we wanted to show a competitive spirit that rivaled the engineering that was in these cars. And frankly, that's what we did.
Yeah, and one other car that since this is the 5 BMWs to watch installment here, on the analog topic, the V8, the E90, E92, E93 M3 platform is one that we've seen a massive. It's a resurgence, if you will. I mean, it was a used car up until just a couple years ago. And again, some would argue that that's going to be the last of the real pure analog DNA of the brand, the last naturally aspirated engine in an M3 car, and the last M3 that had 2 doors. And that car, the engine noise, for any of you that have not driven a V8 powered M3, is intoxicating. you can still get one for a relatively good deal, and unlike no different than the the E46 market. The early cars did have some problems with the bottom end and the rod bearings, and the later cars in the 11s, the 12s, and 13s are more bulletproof. Oil changes are very important on those, but that's a different talk. But the E30,
Should they put the dipstick back?
well, no, they should just change the oil a little more often, is all, and use the right oil. But the E92 and E90 M3s are one that you definitely should watch. Those cars have started to go up in value over the last 2-3 years. We cannot keep them in stock. If we had 20 of them, they'd be gone in a week. But the problem is, again, super great car that just was driven a lot of miles, and so really good top ones are hard to find. But still, you can get into an early car for 20 grand, 25 grand, and you can have a ton of fun in that car for a long period of time. It's a very reliable car overall, and all the little stuff that on the older cars, brakes and stuff, is a lot better built than that chassis.
And I want to go full circle now here before we stop, because in the tent right over here, Dirk, that's your 328, right? The black one?
No, it's not.
Oh, it's not. Okay. Well, we have a lovely 328 back here, and I think we also have a 319 next to it, a car I used to. It's a 315 or a 319. Two lovely examples of early BMW history. And when you talk about what makes a collector car, you talk about the brand values through time. Dirk would sit here and talk all afternoon about the 328 and the 507 if we let him. But it really did set the stage for everything that came later. And you talk about where does that go in the future, even in a changing world and a changing market. Look at the Z8. The Z8 was a very interesting retro concept, essentially with an M5 driveline. Really fun car to drive, really bare bones design, very historically relevant to the brand. And look at the i8. The i8 was also a fantastic experiment. Very, very cutting edge. A lot of people thought it should have been a 12-cylinder modern M1. But I don't care who you are. You look at an i8 and you are struck by how beautiful this car is. It's only as a secondary note do you realize it's a hybrid with two different power sources. So it's not the end of the performance car marketplace or the relevance of the BMW brand. There are many people saying this is a new beginning and there's a whole lot of development ahead of us that really will be fun to follow.
It's just a transition more than anything else. I mean, everything's going to continue to evolve, and the phones that were in our pocket 10 years ago, we would never use today. It's the same. It's just different. It's not that it's that it's bad. The M2 competition, fantastic car, awesome car, great car. That's the next D30, 10, 20 years from now, my opinion.
Well, we're segueing nicely in the rain again to some Q&A. And I think everyone here, we may have some questions that have been thought up. We'd like to leave a little bit of time for these guys to answer them. If we can get Jonathan, the lovely Jonathan is getting a microphone that we can pass out. And this is Jonathan Stein, also with Hagerty. Jonathan actually runs our seminar programs, put together the presentation, had a lot to do with securing these panelists that we have here today. So we all owe Jonathan a debt of thanks for bringing everyone here together. So. All right, do we have any hands up out of the gate for a little question on BMW? We got one right over there. E31s?
E50s, what do you guys think about the direction of that? It's especially with the new 8, which is questionable whether or not it's in the lineage of the 8. But particularly the CSIs are now going for 6 figures. The M73 cars, which are even less produced than the CSIs, are still hovering around 10 to 15. So, I think what do you think of this investment or fun or something unique, like the i8?
Sure. So the 850, the E31 chassis, 91 model year to 97 model year for North America. The 850i, the 850ci, and then 94, 95, BMW built 225 of the 850 CSIs. Manual transmission, 6-speed only, $102,000 MSRP. If you were a Major League Baseball player, if you were a basketball player, if you were a pop star singer that just had to have pop-up headlights, Prince had one, Ken Griffey Jr. had an 850 CSI. Again, the rate of attrition of those cars, any E31 is extremely high. It's a very complex car. It's a supercomputer of the era, and try to get your 386 or 486 computer to turn on. It's two computers, two batteries, two systems, two engines basically fused together with one crank, and two DMEs, two everything. And getting that car to run consistently was difficult. And when that battery died, or whichever one, or whatever system failed, that car got parked. And it got parked typically in the back, and then more cars got put in front of it, especially in the collector world, and they just sat idle for 5 or 10 or 15 years. And bringing that car back, resurrecting those cars that have been sitting for that long, I can tell you what, that is a job, and it's not cheap.
Let me just tell you, I will try to address your question, but then I want to tell you a little story that's kind of fun. The car is enormously complex. It's enormously heavy. 2 batteries and 7 servo motors just for the seats. It goes on and on.
Yeah, I've been restoring one, and it's
Okay,
ridiculous.
so
It's
I don't want to
cost me
talk you.
as much as I purchased the car originally. I've almost doubled that in restoration.
That's our fear. Well, you're halfway there. I mean, that's the. Let me tell you a quick story that you might like.
But I'll tell you, it turns heads at every
At
every
no
car
question.
show, and people are y'all. My best story is a guy with the GT3 touring. So I said, "That's a really cool car," and he turned to me and said, "No, you've got the cool car."
Well,
So,
we wanted to do an M8, and they built one, and they showed it to us, and it was so outrageous, even the engineers started laughing. The board took one look at it and ran in the opposite direction. So the CSI became our de facto M8. But I was involved with that car. I was in all the meetings. So here's my story. Nelson Piquet wants to come to Indy and drive the Indy 500. Munich calls me and said, Nelson is coming into town for the month of May. You got to get him a car. And I said, okay, fine. We got an 850 CSI from the press pool and brought it to Indianapolis. And he used it during the month of May while he was there. So 2 weeks later, I'm sitting at my desk and somebody throws a copy of the Indianapolis Star newspaper on my desk. And I look down, and right on the cover is this huge photo of Nelson Piquet and Johnny Rutherford looking at the 850 in the middle of an intersection with a Nova on the hood. The car was right up on the hood, and they said, major accident, Nelson Piquet unhurt, blah, blah, blah. And they untangled the whole thing. Nelson went back to Europe, blah, blah, blah. The hood, we had to replace the hood, and it was $22,000. So that was just the start. So a year later, we bring him back to do the Monterey Historics, and he walks up to me and says, Eric, here's an autographed picture. I'm really sorry about what happened to the car. And I said, thanks, Nelson. Thanks a lot. That's great.
We're going to have time for just another question. They need to be bringing in lunch now, so there's some fun weather-related things. So let's do another question from out here from Jonathan sprinting to the side.
While he's going over there, your question was about values. And the 8 Series is going up. The new 8 Series is on the road. The M8 burnout yesterday with Bill Auberlin, who didn't think that was awesome. Sweet in-car video of that on our YouTube channel, by the way. The 8 Series, though, the 850 CSIs, we just sold one for $155,000 2 weeks ago. That's the third one we've sold in that territory in the last 12 months. So that's big money, big car, right car, number one condition car. But the standard 8 Series, though, your investment's probably going to be good over the 5-year. If you bought the right car, again, always buy quality. You shouldn't get hurt in that car, so long as every button does what it's supposed to do.
All right, last question over there, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Are you sure?
I was just curious as to where you see the V10, M5, M6 in the future. I know at one time they were over $100,000, and now they seem to be hitting the 25, 30,000 mark. Where do you see those going in the future?
Well, just take a look at what that is. I mean, the V10 was an awesome development. I mean, Steve Dinan took them and cleaned up in prototype competition. It is essentially a race motor built for the street. And if you look at the normal depreciation curve of a car, you are looking at a lovely piece of engineering. Again, Eric will tell you about condition, but that is the time to be looking carefully at buying one, in my opinion.
The values, I think, are safe. You want, again, get a later production car that has a better bottom end. The 09s and 10s have a different bearing shell, so that's going to be a more reliable engine setup, which is going to be your main cost. But we just had a M5 that had about $95,000 worth of customer pay and dealer warranty work from 2008 till 2018 when we bought it, with 24,000 miles on it. No, excuse me, it had 32,000 miles on it. Engine replaced, all that stuff. So the value of the MSRP was put back into the car over 32,000 miles. That guy, I'm sure, had a lot of fun, but it was a very costly ride. You get the right car, though. I think that it's a safe place to park money. The engine sound, the engine note is magical. I mean, that's an F1 engine for the street. Good place to be. Very fun car. But again, you got to buy wisely and take your mechanic with you before you buy it, or have it inspected by somebody that knows what they're doing.
Thank you.
They've given us another 10 or 15, so we're good. Somebody within range? How about the middle?
Can you address how the value is affected if it's a single owner car, particularly going back into the 70s?
I guess it depends who that single owner was.
Amen. I mean, he's totally right about that, because if he parked it in a barn and mice ate it for the last 25 years because he fell ill or whatever the story may be, I think the best advice a lot of people have given me over the years, and every time that somebody's selling a car, we talk to them and they tell us their whole storyline of the whole car, an ownership lap, if you will. And same thing when we're getting ready to sell a car to somebody, they tell us why they want to have that car, or their past ownership lap of a car that they had similar to that. And you don't buy the owner. I don't care if it's a 10-owner car. You buy the most recent owner because he's the guy that signed up to be responsible for that car. And if he's the right owner, he did his due diligence up before the time buying that car. And you don't buy the car, you buy the owner. That's absolutely the sagest advice in buying any used car. But I think that, again, making sure you do all of your due diligence, quantity of owner and quality of owner are two totally different things. And I'll take quality over quantity every day of the week. No pop stars, but we buy all of our cars back from our clients for a reason, because it was the right car to start with. We go through the car, make it turnkey, and we have an E30 M3 right now that we bought in 2005. It was the car that we first bought back ever, 6 months after we sold it. The guy had a great experience. You know this car, you love this car, you sold me on this car. I'm ready to check the box. I want to get something different. Would you like to buy your old car back? And there was like an aha moment. Like, I do know that car. It's 3 owners, now 4. It's a lot of owners, but they're all great guys, a lot of PCA guys, a lot of track guys. The car had been upheld to a high standard. We'd already put 10 grand into it in 2005. I knew it was a great car, so we bought it back. We have that car in inventory right now, and the next person we sell it to will be the 16th owner of that car. We've sold it 11 times. That's a high number of owners, but at 113,000 miles, that car will clean up any Concord you want to put it in relative to its class. It's super, super nice because of the people that have come before it.
Well, and you get a lot of cars that are aspirational, right? So you have people at a level that will buy one because they want to get a little taste of what this is all about, and maybe they've got another car that they've got their sights on later. Yeah, checking boxes off. So I think there's a lot of cars like the ones we talked about today that sort of fit that, especially at this price point. People want to get in kind of, you said earlier today at breakfast, it was mainlining versus getting their first taste, right?
And I think one thing that we all feel comfortable about when you're looking on Bring a Trailer or eBay or wherever, if you see a BMW CCA sticker in the back window, as long as it doesn't look like it's 100 years old, you might have a good feeling that the enthusiast owner has taken care of the car. I wouldn't be afraid of a car if it had track stickers in the back window. That just means that it's been looked at underneath and all around and well maintained so it can stay on track. And without that sort of history, you don't know what you're going to be getting, but if it's been used and used well and used by somebody who knows what they're doing, I wouldn't be afraid of a multiple owner car, even if it's been hard used, as long as it's been well used.
I'll give you the converse to that. I used to get all of the crazy requests that we would receive as a company. They didn't know what to do with it. It would land on my desk. One day I got a pair of underwear from Prince, and it was purple, And he said, I want you to build a 7 Series for me, just this color. And I'm not kidding you, it was purple.
His CSI was purple too.
So we go to Munich, we build the car, this and that. He gets a picture taken on Guitarist magazine. It's on the cover, he's sitting on the hood. 4 days later, his drummer totals it. So, I mean, I got Tom Cruise sending me his fuel filler cap from his 911, build Nicole a car this color. It went on and on and on. And there's no arguing about taste. I mean, they want what they want. But I would not buy a used car from a pop star.
Any other questions?
We have one over here.
Where are we? All right, and this will be the last one so we can clear out and get everybody fed.
All right, my question is about, in the BMW world, making modifications, engine swaps and stuff are kind of considered acceptable. In the bigger collector car world, authenticity is everything. Where is the crossover point where it starts to matter? Something like a coupe or something, at what price do you need to be concerned about numbers matching and putting the car back to stock?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, every model line is going to be different because certain models, when you're into the 4-figure versus 5-figure versus 6-figure, 7-figure, there's where it's really going to come in, especially with 507s having an original numbers matching, or CSL having numbers matching. The lower dollar cars, it doesn't matter obviously quite as much. The drivers' cars, the cars that had a notoriously bad component, that there's a superseded part of putting an upgraded, especially a BMW correct part off a later model, upgraded shock mount or something from a different car. I think those are going to be okay to update and upgrade. Retrofitting air conditioning on a car that might not have had it is going to be more of a value add these days because it makes the car more usable. Anything that makes the car more safe, more reliable, more usable, especially the more stock-esque, it's an invisible upgrade. Those things are going to be modern, allowed, and if not even maybe preferred, valued maybe even higher in some cases. But when you get into big, crazy, superchargers and turbochargers and things that just never, somebody re-engineers the whole dynamics of the car and it totally goes hard left. The valuation, it's somebody's project and it's their taste, and does the next guy appreciate that or not? You're appealing to just a very small segment of a market as opposed to the whole fishbowl when you go completely crazy with it. But a lot of the 2002s are doing a lot of different engine swaps, and just about anything plugs and plays in those, and like the E30s that we talked about as well earlier. It's, I guess, just how well is it done? Who did it? Is it reversible, and do all the stock stuff retain, or do we have that numbers matching block and head sitting in the crate that would go with it so that we could at any point put it back to stock in 10 hours, 20 hours, 3 weeks, whatever the take time is to do it. I think authenticity, the originality, the survivor cars that have never been taken apart, of course, are always going to be the most desirable and the most valuable, the most rewarded in the marketplace. But you got to have to be able to be out there and drive it safely as well. So it's a fine line. So it's a good question. But I think if it's done tastefully by the right people, more times than not, it can be a value add or neutral.
And there are so many, I wouldn't go so far as to say factory authorized, but like Dynan has put kits together, twin turbo, like we were talking about the 840s, 850s. They had some twin turbo kits for those. Those things would go 200 miles an hour.
No, there's no doubt. I mean,
Yeah.
Reeves Callaway with Corvettes. I mean, the examples go on and on. Steve Dynan was a superb engineer, is a superb engineer, and we worked very hard to bring him into the NA orbit as almost a Alpina tuner in Europe, in the United States. Back in the day, he was hands down the best engineer on BMWs we had ever seen. And it took some really delicate diplomatic work. You can call me Henry Kissinger if you like, because we had to get with our warranty people to work out a matching warranty situation, which they really did not want to do through the dealers. But even to this day, it survives, and they built some cracking good cars.
Yeah.
And then the Dynan cars will sell more times than not for more money than what the stock would. We've got literally thousands of sales comps at this point to justify that. But make the car your own, and most important, enjoy it. Drive it. If you're having a great time with it, does it really matter if it's worth a little bit more or not? I don't think so. If you're smiling, if your friends are smiling, if your family's smiling, and you're making great memories with the car, does it really matter? I don't think so.
Eric, thank you. That's an absolutely fantastic segue to the end of this. Buy what you love. The values of these things, it's great if on a chart it looks like it's made some money, but in the reality, if you haven't enjoyed your ownership experience in it, what's it all for? I want to really thank our panel for being here. Yeah, I mean, we got two Erics here, David and a Dirk, and these guys were awesome today. And thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having us, and thank you for coming.
Yeah.
And let me also give a little shout out to Hagerty. These folks really get it. They're really about enthusiast driving. All my cars are insured with Hagerty. These folks are the ones to talk to. We really, really appreciate you coming out with us today.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to go a little further with that real quick, too. We've obviously, with all of our clients, they've got special cars that, like, how do I get this insured? Because I just paid $10,000, $20,000 more than everybody else is paying for this stuff. And we've referred hundreds of people to Hagerty. They've been fantastic to deal with all of our clients. And really, you pay the insurance to never have to need it, never have to use it. The few times when we have had clients that have had something hit the fan that rhymes with it, the support, the valuation, and how well they've worked with them and not made it just a business transaction, but hey, we're really sorry that your family member, your car is gone. We'll talk, is everybody safe? Okay, then we'll get to the valuation part. And they've been made whole. One of the E30 M3s that we sold back in 2006 or 7 was lost in those floods in Texas. And Hagerty wrote them a retail EAG level check for that car in one telephone conversation with the underwriter calling us. And that owner is, I'm sure, going to be a lifetime client, and that's why we're comfortable to refer everybody to you guys.
Well, we appreciate that very much. And one of the things that Hagerty's really moved into over the past year or so is our new Hagerty Drivers Club. So you can be an insurance client of ours, which we now say you're a member. And if you join our Drivers Club, we're actually putting on a lot of events like this that are just for members. So this is a really fantastic panel. We've had a lot of fun with it. If you're a Hagerty Drivers Club member, you'll also get our award-winning magazine, which is really great. I'm in this past issue posing on the back of a Pontiac Firebird, so you won't want to miss that, of course. Wearing a pair of cutoff
It's a good
jeans.
magazine, too.
Yeah, it's a great magazine, except for page 46. And we do automotive discounts for things like shipping your car across the country and buying tires for it, all that kind of stuff. And we really just want to use this as a point of education for getting enthusiasts out there using their cars, giving people tours and rallies and all kinds of great ways to engage. So we love car people. We love people that drive and enjoy their cars. And we love the BMW Club. And there's a special discount for BMW Club members, if you aren't already a member of ours, to come join us. So thank you again. We're going to let you all get fed. We're going to take a last photo. Thank you again to Jonathan and our panel. Awesome to be here.